Well, joining our Tuesday panel today, Labor MP Josh Burns and Nationals MP Anne Webster. Thank you to both of you for joining us today.
Pleasure.
Thanks,
I do want to start with you, Anne Webster, even though I would normally go to Josh Burns, and I do have to keep reminding myself to do that, seeing as that you are now the government representative, not Anne Webster. But just because you've come out of your party room meeting in the last hour or so, and it seems like there's been some movement there about where the coalition stands on the issue of Labor's climate bill. Is it dead as far as you're concerned? Is there any situation where a coalition government would support that climate bill to enshrine that 43% target?
Look, our position is that this is Labor's bill. Labor have to explain how it's going to happen, who's going to pay for it, and that's their responsibility. The Labor government has already, the Prime Minister has said that he's already been over and written his letter to the UN, putting us in the position where we must achieve 43% by 2030. This is their gig. Under our gig, we were working towards climate targets without putting it into legislation. From our perspective, there is no benefit in legislating which is upfront and transparent.
And I understand that the new opposition leader, Peter Dutton, said that the party would settle on a new emissions reduction target, but that won't be announced until much closer to the election. This is a debate which has been raging for much longer than I've been in this place, certainly longer than you've been in this place as well. Why does it need to wait until that much closer to an election, considering we're 3 years out? Is there nothing you can do now to shift the coalition's position or make it more clear?
Our responsibility in opposition is to hold the Labor government to account. That's our first and primary responsibility, and we're dedicated to that. And you will see that the opposition, the Liberal and Nationals in government, will continue to hold this Albanese government to account for every decision they make, every piece of legislation that they put up. We're not in a position right now where we are in a hurry to develop policy. There are obviously policies that we put to the people. At the previous election, which were successful, we had a technology roadmap. We still believe in that technology roadmap. The big question that, as I said a minute ago, is who's going to pay for this and how is it going to happen? And what kind of costs will every family turning on their lights pay? And will small businesses be able to continue to operate? They're the questions that are burning on our mind for the people in our electorates.
I kind of feel like I'm in the chamber at the moment because it's like speaking through the speaker here with a question. Clearly that was
You're
a question.
speaker figure in my eyes, mate.
Clearly that was a question for the government, how this will actually be absorbed by the broader community. What do you say to members of the public who are concerned about what this bill actually means to them, and particularly when we're going through a cost of living crisis, what it's going to mean for their household budgets? Well,
the cheapest form of new energy is renewable energy with some form of firmed dispatchable energy, Matt. And it's not me saying that as an enthusiastic supporter of renewable energies. It was the Australian Energy Market Operator that operated under Scott Morrison's government that said that clearly in their reports over and over again. So if you want to know about how to reduce power bills, we've got to invest in renewable energy. I'd also make the point that it is bewildering that the coalition have just lost like 6 seats to independents, 2 to the Greens, a whole suite of seats to the Labor Party, and they still are incapable of supporting climate action in the Parliament. And as much as I genuinely want the coalition to come on board with this journey of climate action, like we need to move past the debate of the last decade. But if Peter Dutton and the coalition are going to rule themselves out of climate action, then the rest of the country, including the Business Council, National Farmers Federation, the Minerals Council, conservation groups, environmental groups, unions, like we are all moving on. And if they want to be left behind, then that is a matter for them.
You've mentioned there the organisations that are in favour of this legislation. We are currently dealing with a parliamentary process, and your colleagues will have to get the support of the Greens in the Senate. You'll have to get the support of at least one senator, likely the ACT's David Pocock there. What do you think is going to be required to get them over the line and support this bill?
Well, again, we've genuinely sought to engage in good faith across the parliament, including in the House of Representatives with the independent members who, we all know we don't need their vote, but we wanted their input into the bill. And that process has been collaborative, and from all reports on both sides, it's been a really good part of the way in which the parliament should operate. We should be collaborating on these big national issues. And the Greens have their party processes. I respect their party processes. They can do their thing. They haven't announced that they won't support it. The conversations from my reports have been in good faith, and I would urge the Greens and urge the independents to support this bill so we can take a huge step forward and then think about what's next. What are the next things that we need to do to lower our emissions, to ease power prices for Australian families, and to do our bit as good citizens to tackle climate change.
I do want to throw one more question about this to Anne Webster. You may have heard Maureen Faruqi describing, kicking the can down the road in our earlier interview. If we're talking about holding off until closer to the next election for the coalition to become clear with its target, isn't that doing the same thing? We know how difficult it's been to arrive at a position on climate within the coalition, within your own party, the Nationals. There was quite a fierce debate ahead of the Glasgow Climate Summit. Why isn't the coalition paying attention to, as what Josh Burns has said there, that message that has come from voters in those seats where the coalition has lost members?
Look, I might take you to a specific email that I just received from a small business down in Stawell. A couple of months ago, when gas prices started to hike, one of the brickworks down in Stawell had to close. 80-year-old business who could not compete with the gas prices. The other bricks business across the road has just sent me his 2 invoices that have changed from $98,000 a month, pretty hefty gas bill, to now $500,000 for the month of June. These are the questions that need to be asked. You cannot take climate change as a blue sky prospect without actually addressing the real changes that are happening for people who are bearing the brunt of decisions that are being made by this government. And we will continue to hold them to account. And we'll be very interested to see all the legislation that comes through from Labor.
Josh Burns, is it going to be difficult to win over people like those members of Anne Webster's community? I mean, you're not going to an election for ideally a couple of years or so, but is it going to be hard to win that debate in the court of public opinion when people are experiencing that sort of bill shock when they're dealing with their power prices?
I think it's a wonderful demonstration of why we need to be moving towards our own sovereign, cheap, reliable, affordable version of energy. And what we know is that the cheapest form of energy is renewable energy. Now, I'm not sure about the circumstances of these businesses, whether they use gas as a feedstock or, whether a manufacturing business. So it might be a slightly different arrangement for some of these businesses. But what I can say is that, if you want to think about the global price shocks around gas that has forced Europe to purchase more Australian gas because they don't want Russian gas, you want to have an energy system that's not affected by those sorts of international shocks, then we need our own sovereign capability. And the cheapest and most abundant form of energy that will be available to us over the next decades and generations is solar. We have a desert the size of the Sahara. We have the largest offshore wind capabilities perhaps in any country in the world. This is where the new energy and the cheapest form of energy is going to come from. That's what we need to do for businesses, what Anne's talking about.
Can I jump in there and just point out to Labor and to the Greens that when you're talking about brickworks and serious manufacturing, the wind farms and the solar don't cut it. They need heat processing power. That comes from dispatchable power such as gas, such as coal, potentially such as nuclear. And they're the conversations that need to be acknowledged, that, telling a brickworks factory or any other manufacturing factory that they can just throw some solar panels on the roof and it'll solve their problem. It just shows the lack of understanding.
I think we might be a fair way off what the Prime Minister's asking for in an end to the climate debate or the climate wars here. And Webster, I do want to pick up on something else when we're talking about bill shock, about the soaring price of things, and that is fuel. Why did the Coalition decide that it was okay to end the halving of the fuel excise in September when it was in government, and is now demanding that the new government continue it even longer?
Look, I think that the fuel excise was halved when the then Treasurer and Prime Minister halved it because of the situation that we are facing globally. What the coalition has shown is that it could be flexible. While we had a stop date, given that the global circumstances actually haven't changed yet, that's why we are now calling that it should be extended. Well, that's not actually in print, but that is the recommendation that I would certainly make, is that it is extended because the global circumstances have not changed yet.
Well, Josh Burns, I mean, no one likes seeing taxes going up. Have the coalition got you in a position here where you are going to have to yield so that voters don't experience that pain at the Bowser come September?
Well, putting aside the cynical ploy of extending payments just on the other side of an election, I'd make this point, Matt, is that the fastest growing payment in the federal budget right now, the biggest expenditure that taxpayers of Australia are left with, is our payment down on government debt. It is growing faster than the NDIS. It's growing faster than education. It's growing faster than health. Literally, Australian taxpayers have a growing debt bill that is just paying down debt, and it is growing faster than any other form of government expenditure. Now, we actually have to be responsible economic managers. Now, does that mean that we don't recognise the genuine pain that Australian families are experiencing? I mean, of course we do, and there is a range of cost of living measures that you'll see in the budget, things like more affordable childcare, more affordable medicines, investment in cheaper electricity. But, like, you know, we actually have to deal with debt, and if we don't deal with the $1 trillion of debt that we inherited, then this bill, where taxpayers are going to be literally spending billions and billions of dollars every year on nothing, is going to keep growing.
Josh Burns, Anne Webster, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Matt.
Authorised by Anne Webster, The Nationals, Mildura.